for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
Earlier this afternoon, Donald Trump was arraigned on a New York Supreme Court indictment returned by a Manhattan grand jury on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. Under New York state law, it is a felony to falsify business records with intent to defraud and an intent to conceal another crime. That is exactly what this case is about. 34 false statements made to cover up other crimes. These are felony crimes in New York State, no matter who you are. We cannot and will not normalize serious criminal conduct.
And those are the words from Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, as Donald Trump has been charged with 34 felonies. I never thought I would see this day, but it's a great day. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. I'm Darren Gibson, your host today. We have a lot of stuff to cover today, so before we get into our topics, a couple of reminders that you can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube and Mastodon by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. And you can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Podvine, and Pandora by doing a search for Southpaws. And once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, YouTube, and Mastodon accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern. And you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and KEPJ in San Antonio, Texas. So be sure to listen to us on your local Pacifica affiliate. We also want to send a special shout out to WNHN in New Hampshire for downloading last week's episode. We hope you join our family. And right now, let's go ahead to the top story as we played the audio at the beginning of the show. I have this story from Michael R. Sizak, Eric Tucker, Jennifer Peltz, and Will Weissert, writing for the Associated Press out of New York. This is dated April 4th. In unsealing a historic 34-count felony indictment against Donald Trump, prosecutors said Tuesday that Trump conspired to illegally influence the 2016 election through a series of hush money payments designed to stifle claims that could be harmful to his candidacy. Assistant District Attorney Christopher Conroy said the payments were part of, quote, an unlawful plan to identify and suppress negative information that could have undermined his campaign for president, end of quote. Trump, stone-faced and silent as he entered and exited the Manhattan courtroom, said not guilty in a firm voice while facing a judge who warned him to refrain from rhetoric that could inflame or cause civil unrest. Because the judge pretty much told him, you do that, it's going to be straight to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200. The judge is not playing on this one, and it's about time. Trump's next court date is December 4th, though it is not clear if he will be required to appear. Apparently, we've had some clarification on that, and the judge has said, and for that matter, the district attorney has said, you're no different from anybody else. If somebody else has to appear, you have to appear, because he's trying to be absent from some of these. So there you go. The broad contours of the case have long been known, but indictment contains new details about a scheme the prosecutors say involved payoffs to two women including a porn star who they said had extramarital sexual encounters with him years earlier, as well as to a Trump Tower doorman who claimed to have a story about a child that Trump had out of wedlock. The arraignment, though largely procedural in nature, amounts to a remarkable reckoning for Trump after years of investigations into his personal, business, and political dealings. The case is unfolding against the backdrop not only of his third campaign for the White House, but also against other investigations in Washington and Atlanta that might yet produce even more charges. Trump, his lips pursed in apparent anger, entered the courtroom shortly before 2:30 p.m. He left court about an hour later, also without commenting. All told, the typically verbose Trump spoke only about 10 words during the entire proceeding. It's beautiful to see him, and for that matter, all the other evil, violent, conservative traitors with their mouths shut. Notice the conservative media has been trying to push other stories and have been trying to bury the Donald Trump indictment. Most specifically, USA Radio News. I'll just call Lance Pry out by name. Before the arraignment, he narrated his feelings in real time, describing the experience as surreal as he traveled from Trump Tower to Lower Manhattan to face a judge. The day's schedule, with its striking blend of legal and political events, represents the new split-screen reality for Trump as he submits to the dour demands of the American criminal justice system while projecting an aura of defiance and victimhood at celebratory campaign events. Now, you can't have it both ways there, Donnie. Wearing his signature dark suit and red tie, Trump turned and waved to crowds outside the building before heading inside to be fingerprinted and processed. He arrived at court in an 8-car motorcade from Trump Tower, communicating in real time his anger at the process. He posted on his Truth Social platform, quote, "Heading to Lower Manhattan, the courthouse, seems so surreal. Wow, they are going to arrest me. Can't believe this is happening in America. MAGA," end of quote. MAGA now officially stands for My Ass Got Arrested. Afterward, Trump lawyer Todd Blanche told reporters that it was, quote, "a sad day for the country. You don't expect this to happen to somebody who was president of the United States," end of quote. Trump, who was impeached twice by the U.S. House but was never convicted in the U.S. Senate, is the first former president to face criminal charges. The nation's 45th commander-in-chief was escorted from Trump Tower to the courthouse by the Secret Service. Trump lawyer Joe Tacopina told the Associated Press, quote, "He is strong and ready to go," end of quote. Earlier, Tacopina said in a TV interview that Trump wouldn't plead guilty to lesser charges even if it might resolve the case. He also said he didn't think the case would make it to a jury. New York police said they were ready for large protests by Trump supporters who share Trump's belief that the New York grand jury indictment and 3 additional pending investigations are politically motivated and intended to weaken his bid to retake the White House in 2024. Well, I've got news for you about that. No, this is actual justice happening for once. Journalists often outnumbered protesters, though. We'll get to the protest in just a little bit. Trump, a former reality TV star, has been hyping that narrative to his political advantage, saying he raised more than $8 million in the days since the indictment on claims of a witch hunt. Let me just clarify. What he has done is that the con has suckered the marks again to the tune of $8 million. You are all carny marks, and Donald Trump is the biggest carny walking the planet. His campaign released a fundraising request titled "My Last Email Before Arrest," and he has repeatedly assailed Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, egged on supporters to protest, and claimed without evidence that the judge presiding over the case, quote, "hates me," end of quote, something his own lawyer has said is not true. Yeah, because Trump lies. That's all he does. Every time he opens his mouth, a lie falls out of it. Trump was scheduled to return to his Palm Beach, Florida home, Mar-a-Lago, on Tuesday evening to give remarks. He did that. We're not going to play him because I don't want to hear that awful orange pig's voice. At least 500 prominent supporters have been invited, with some of the most pro-Trump congressional Republicans expected to attend. A conviction would not prevent Trump from running for or winning the presidency in 2024, but it should. The investigation is scrutinizing six-figure payments made to porn actress Stormy Daniels and former Playboy model Karen McDougal. Both say they had sexual encounters with the married Trump years before he got into politics. Trump denies having sexual liaisons with either woman and has denied any wrongdoing involving payments. Yeah, I never slept with that woman. Yeah. Trump hasn't met a woman that he's tried to get in bed or rape. I'll just put it bluntly. There you go, folks. The arraignment unfolded against the backdrop of heavy security in New York, coming more than 2 years after Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol in a failed bid to halt the congressional certification of Democrat Joe Biden's win. Let me add, traitorously stormed the U.S. Capitol. They are traitors. Trump was defiant ahead of his arraignment. He used his social media network to complain that he was going to court in a heavily Democratic area, declaring, quote, kangaroo court, end of quote, and, quote, this is not what America was supposed to be, end of quote. By the way, he typed that all out in all capital letters. He and his campaign have repeatedly assailed Bragg and even trained scrutiny on members of Bragg's family. Despite that, the scenes around Trump Tower and the courthouse where Trump will stand before a judge did not feature major unrest. Police tried to keep apart protesters supporting Trump and those opposing him by confining them to separate sides of a park near the courthouse using metal barricades. Georgia Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of Trump's staunchest supporters in Congress, staged a brief rally at the park, but the scene was so chaotic that it was hard to hear her over the crush of reporters and protesters. Thanking those Trump supporters present, Greene said, quote, we're the party of peace. Democrats are communists, end of quote. Yeah, you sons of bitches are so peaceful that you stormed the United States Capitol in a traitorous fashion to try to overthrow the government. You assaulted cops. You killed cops. Yeah, that's what I am going to say every time. Oh, we're pro-police. You know, I'm not pro-police, but I'm honest about it. And I'm honest with the reasons why all cops are bastards. Sorry. Embattled Republican New York Representative George Santos also showed up in solidarity with Trump, saying, quote, I want to support the president. I think this is unprecedented and it's a bad day for democracy, end of quote. No, this is a beautiful day for democracy. Justice is finally happening. Santos suggested that future prosecutors could target Biden and other presidents with other cases, which, quote, cheapens the judicial system, end of quote. No, Santos is afraid that his ass is going to be next because he is a liar, a pathological liar, just like the orange pig Trump. New York's ability to carry out safe and drama-free courthouse proceedings in a case involving Trump could be an important test case as prosecutors in Atlanta and Washington conduct their own investigations of Trump that could also result in charges. Those investigations concern efforts to undo the 2020 election results, as well as the possible mishandling of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. And let's go a little bit deeper into the protests supporting Trump. This is Brian Price, Melissa Colorado, Jennifer Millman, Tom Shea, and Jonathan Dienst, writing for WNBC Television, dated April 4th. Hundreds of onlookers, protesters, journalists, and a few attention-seeking politicians swarmed the lower Manhattan courthouse where Donald Trump was scheduled to be arraigned Tuesday afternoon. A morning rally for Trump in support of him had been expected to draw numbers, including headlining Speaker Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. The Republican lawmaker arrived amid the chaotic crowds of pro- and anti-Trump supporters where she delivered brief remarks. Shouting through a small handheld megaphone, Greene's message to Trump supporters was essentially drowned out by the suffocating crowd of people and media gathered outside. Security whisked her away a few minutes later. In an interview posted online, Greene said she planned to speak with media from a car and accused counter-protesters of assault for blowing whistles and shouting as she spoke. NBC News reported that the whistles were being handed out by a Trump supporter who said, quote, "We're here to make noise," end of quote. So she even got that wrong. Unbelievable. The controversial Republican, known for her extremist viewpoints, had brief support from Representative George Santos, who appeared among the courthouse chaos half an hour before the rally's official start time. He left around 10 a.m. with no plan to return. During his blink and you'll miss it appearance, the Long Island politician criticized Bragg and expressed his support for Trump. He insisted to reporters, quote, "I'm not here for the cameras. I want to support the president just because I think this is unprecedented and it's a bad day for democracy," end of quote. Here's the best part. New York's own Representative Jamal Bowman, Democrat, was among the crowd shouting as Greene left the Manhattan courthouse. Bowman said, quote, "Go back to your district. What are you doing here? You're here for politics," end of quote. He also told her to get her ass back to Washington to pass gun reform legislation. So, congratulations, Jamal Bowman. I love you, man. Beautiful. The crowds grew larger as the hour drew closer to Trump's arrival at the courthouse to become the first former president in U.S. history to face criminal charges. Demonstrators broke out into chants of, "No one is above the law, Trump is not above the law." The crowd was small by the standards of New York City protests, which routinely draw thousands, and fears that unruly mobs might force police to shut down swaths of the city proved to be unfounded, with security measures mostly disappearing within a couple of blocks. Initial crowd estimates from police had Trump supporters outnumber his detractors by a margin of about 2-1. Both sides were separated by metal barriers. The size of the barricaded crowds may match the volume of press members covering the day, which have also swarmed the area. Anti-Trump protesters unfurled a large banner saying "Trump lies all the time." A brief scuffle broke out between pro- and anti-Trump supporters, with the former tearing up a banner outside the courthouse. Yeah, because evil, violent conservative traitors like to cause property damage and they like to cause injury to people. Because that's what they are. Evil, violent, conservative traitors. NBC News reported that police intervened and separated the groups. With the pall of the January 6, 2021 traitorous insurrection still looming large, I added traitorous, the New York police and its law enforcement partners at all levels of government have been preparing for any eventuality. At a press conference the day before, the head of the New York Police Department warned of rolling street closures and increased police presence, both likely to gum up movement around Manhattan. Some may just want to stay out of the city, especially if they intended to cause any disruption. That's a statement from Mayor Eric Adams. The Democrat and former police officer urged self-restraint for any protesters on either side who plan to converge on Manhattan this week. Adams specifically called out ardent Trump loyalist Marjorie Taylor Greene, who tweeted last week she planned to come to New York to support him Tuesday. Adams said Monday, quote, "Control yourselves. This city isn't a playground for your misplaced anger. People like MTG, who is known for spreading misinformation and hate speech, she stated that she's coming to our town. While you're here, be on your best behavior," end of quote. God, that sounds just like something Matt Dillon would say in Gunsmoke. "While you're in Dodge, you better behave yourself. I'll put you in jail." And Matt usually ended up shooting him. Trump had vocal support over the weekend in New York from a number of Republican allies, including possible presidential hopeful Ron DeSantis. The Florida governor took the stage in Long Island alongside Representative Lee Zeldin to blast Bragg for what he called a flimsy indictment. He said Saturday, quote, "They're trying to do all these legal gymnastics to try and act like it's a felony when almost every other time he's trying to take the felonies and downgrade them to misdemeanors," end of quote. Yeah, there's another evil, violent son of a bitch. Death sentence. Because now you can conceal carry in Florida and you don't need a permit, training, or anything else. He wants to make it the Wild West when the Wild West wasn't the Wild West. Some demonstrated after Trump told the Globe he expected to be arrested, but those protests were largely muted. The New York Police Department has said there's no credible threat to the city at this point, and it has ordered every member of the department to report in full uniform, and we already mentioned that. Oh, so there you go, folks. Old Donnie is in deep shit, and I can't help but to love it. I absolutely am thrilled by this. I haven't even started to go drinking yet to celebrate and be loud and obnoxious and toast goodbye to the orange. Yep, that's what I'm going to do, as loudly and as obnoxiously as I can. All right, well, I tell you what, folks, we might as well just get into our next segment here. Oh, yeah, here we go with the music. Gotta have it. And now, Hocker and Ramble present As Ottawa County Turns. Brought to you by Crust Toothpaste. It won't get rid of tartar, but it'll make it shine. Because the tartar on your teeth will shine brightly with Crust. Oh my goodness. Well, let's go ahead with the latest saga of Ottawa Impact and the right-wing nut jobs in Ottawa County. Let's get to this story. This is Sarah Leach writing for the Holland Sentinel. This is dated April 5th. As Ottawa County awaits a judge's decision in a lawsuit filed by its health officer, other officials are defending themselves against accusations of illegal activity made by the county's legal counsel during a recent hearing related to the case. Health Officer Adeline Hambley filed her lawsuit February 13th in Ottawa County's 20th Circuit Court, claiming several Ottawa Impact-linked commissioners have repeatedly interfered with her ability to do her job and have overreached their authority by attempting to limit her state-authorized health duties, including standing in the way of critical contracts the county has with local health providers. Hambley's attorney, Sarah Riley Howard, requested Friday, March 31st, that Judge Jenny L. McNeil extend a temporary restraining order she granted March 2nd so the facts in the dispute could be explored in a trial. Hambley is seeking a declaratory judgment saying she's the current, rightfully hired health officer. She's also seeking an injunction that prevents the board from interfering with her job responsibilities and from firing her unless proper procedures are followed. The case was assigned to Muskegon's 14th Circuit Court after all Ottawa County judges recused themselves from hearing the case. David Coleman, the attorney for the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners, said Hambley's claims are without merit because she wasn't properly appointed to the position in December 2022, and the board has an absolute right to supervise the health officer's position. Hambley's suit names Board Chair Joe Moss, Vice Chair Sylvia Rodea, and Commissioners Lucy Ebel, Gretchen Cosby, Roger Belknap, Allison Miedema, and Rebecca Curran, all of whom voted to demote Hambley at the board's inaugural meeting. An amended complaint filed March 24th also named the Board of Commissioners as an entity. A key dispute was if Hambley's appointment is binding to the new board, which is now controlled by Ottawa Impact, an upstart far-right political group born from clashes over the county's COVID-19 mitigation mandates in 2020. Yeah, they're a bunch of anti-science, anti-mask, anti-vaccine, nut job cuckoos. Its founders, Moss and Rodea, were unsuccessful in suing the previous Board of Commissioners and the county's former health officer, Lisa Stefanowski, who retired on Friday, March 31st. In response, they targeted seats on the board in 2022, recruiting like-minded candidates who agreed traditional Republicans weren't enforcing true conservative policies. They successfully defeated enough incumbents in the August primary to win the majority. McNeil granted the temporary restraining order just days after Ottawa Impact commissioners made a correction to a resolution the former board approved on December 13th, appointing Hambly to the role after Stefanowski announced in August she planned to retire in the spring. By the way, their correction is a violation of Michigan's Open Meetings Act. Those minutes were already approved and cannot be amended. Period. End of story. The Ottawa Impact Commissioners argue the resolution approving Hambly's appointment did not accurately reflect the motion and vote that took place because there were wording discrepancies between the written resolution and the verbal motion made by the commissioner who put Hambly's appointment to a vote. By the way, those commissioners have all said they meant to hire Hambly. Period. Coleman said the written resolution wasn't in front of the board when they voted to appoint Hambly in December, and further alleged former board chair Matt Fenske and county clerk Justin Roebuck later changed the written resolution in private, which he asserted was a violation of the state's Open Meetings Act. Yeah, so this is what projecting is. When you're guilty of something, you're going to try and project it and put it on somebody else, and that's what Joe Moss is doing, my opinion. And for that matter, Coleman said the appointed minutes reflect former Commissioner Phil Kyer's verbal motion that the board needed to vote a second time after Hambly passed necessary background checks in order to be fully appointed. Coleman said, quote, "Clerk and chairman intentionally omitted the first contingency. There was no transparency. Boards speak through their official minutes and lawful resolutions based on a public meeting." End of quote. Oh, really? Oh, boy. Yeah, the pot is calling the kettle black for sure. Roebuck says that never happened. In an email statement to the Holland Sentinel, Roebuck wrote, quote, "I am awaiting a copy of the transcript from the court proceedings to verify the exact language that was stated in court before I respond further to Mr. Coleman's claims. However, I categorically deny the allegation that I or any member of my team violated the Open Meetings Act or acted unethically in any way in the conduct of our normal business while processing this resolution. The resolution that I and former Chair Fenske signed is the actual resolution the board approved in the December 13, 2022 meeting, as evidenced by the draft copies of the resolution that were circulated in that open meeting." End of quote. Roebuck said his office operates according to the highest ethical standards and that he and his staff did nothing wrong. Roebuck wrote in his statement, quote, "I take my oath of office seriously and our whole team is committed to acting with integrity and transparency. Unfounded insinuations that we have done anything to the contrary only serve to strain the system of effective government that Ottawa County residents deserve." End of quote. Yeah, I think Roebuck has a lawsuit against Coleman for slander because they said it. And if they filed it and wrote it down, that's liable. Liable is printed, slander is spoken. Fenske did not respond to a request for comment. Commissioners Roger Bergman and Doug Zylstra, who both served on the previous board, confirmed to the Holland Sentinel a copy of the written resolution was provided to the board prior to the vote to appoint Hambly. Zylstra addressed the allegations on his official Facebook page on Monday, April 3rd. Zylstra wrote, quote, "There seems to be some confusion over the last month about what we as a board had before us on December 13th regarding the approval of a new administrative health officer. The facts are that there was a properly added agenda item entitled A Resolution to Appoint a New Administrative Health Officer, which appeared in the minutes, and that there was a physical resolution passed out to each commissioner to read and vote on." End of quote. Roebuck said he wanted the public to understand how the resolution process works and that he and his office followed the proper procedure. Roebuck wrote in his statement, quote, The role of the clerk's office in the board resolution process is to record commissioner votes on the document. My signature is applied to every resolution after it is passed by the board, not before and not during the meeting. Further, my office would never alter any documents, as our constitutional role is to accurately record and preserve all actions of the Board of County Commissioners. End of quote. Judge McNeil said she would review the documents filed from both parties and would issue a written opinion as soon as possible. She did not indicate a specific timeline, however. While she's weighing her ruling, McNeil said that she would allow the temporary restraining order to remain in place. So there's some good news there. So Ottawa County still going at it. It's just unreal. It's time to recall these sons of bitches and get them out of office. They obviously don't know what they're doing, and the governor needs to step in. I'll say it again. I am calling for Governor Gretchen Whitmer to enact the emergency manager law on Ottawa County now. And as we end this segment, we got to have the music and the outro. Join us again soon for another edition of As Ottawa County Turns. This program is produced for Big D Entertainment. Stay tuned for the edge of blight over most of these stations. The edge of blight. Oh, that's good stuff right there, let me just tell you. And speaking of corrupt Republicans, let's get to our next story. This is Simon Schuster writing for MLive. I am not lying, that is his name. This is dated today, Thursday, April 6, 2023. This is breaking news as it's happening right now. Former Michigan House Speaker Rick Johnson, two lobbyists, and the owner of a medical marijuana company will be pleading guilty to a bribery scheme from 2017. That is according to an announcement by U.S. Attorney for the Western District, Mark Totten. Johnson had been chair of the Medical Marijuana Licensing Board, which approved licenses for those businesses to operate under the state's medical marijuana regulations, and he was one of just a few votes that approved or rejected businesses' applications. He was charged Thursday morning with accepting bribes equaling at least $110,200 over the course of nearly 2 years from a number of sources. The four individuals allegedly implicated in the corruption include 70-year-old John Delali, the owner of a marijuana company who allegedly paid more than $68,000 in the form of cash and benefits, and two lobbyists, Brian Pierce and Vincent Brown, who investigators said ferried payments to Johnson through shell companies. Prosecutors described how the money was paid to Johnson in exchange for information about the nascent medical marijuana business licensing system before it was made public, which could have offered the individuals and companies that received it an upper hand against competition in the lucrative market once applications opened in late 2017. Oh, so they were rigging the game right from the start. It's like insider trading. Attorneys from the Department of Justice laid out the charges in what's known as an information sheet. Oh, boy. And by the way, MLive has a copy of it here. I'll have to read that when I got time. Not long after the charges were announced, guilty pleas from the four defendants were also filed. Johnson agreed to pay the full amount in documented bribes to the federal government and agreed the full $110,200 would be due immediately. The guilty plea signed by Johnson described how he received the payments with an understanding that, quote, the payers were seeking information and assistance from him to help them successfully apply for state medical marijuana operating licenses and ultimately for his support for their license applications, end of quote. What's less clear is how long the defendants could potentially serve in prison. The plea agreements indicate the defendants could receive a 2 to 3 point reduction in their offense level, the scoring system used to determine the recommended lengths of sentences. Delali's plea agreement states he gave Johnson at least $68,200 in cash payments and other benefits to Johnson, including 2 private chartered flights from Michigan to Canada on a Lear 35 aircraft and a King Air 200 aircraft by way of 2 companies he operated. One of the companies was a dispensary, while the other was established to be a, quote, digital currency platform for marijuana transactions, end of quote. Oh boy, I have a feeling I know what the name of that company is. Delali was charged with paying a bribe. I'm going to have to look that up, see if I'm right. The 2 lobbyists charged in the investigation, Brian Pierce and Tyler Brown, allegedly used businesses they controlled to shift money from clients to companies controlled by Johnson. 3 companies the prosecutors argued benefited from the bribes were not named in the documents. The plea agreements from the 2 lobbyists are also in this article here. Brown and Pierce both intend to plead guilty to conspiracy to commit bribery. Oh boy! More detailed descriptions of the crimes the 4 intend to plead guilty to are expected to be filed in the coming days. It makes my heart feel good. My heart warms every time a conservative has to plead guilty to a crime or is found guilty of a crime and goes to prison for a long time. Oh, this just, you don't know how much this makes my heart feel good. Oh, it just is beautiful. It's the most beautiful thing ever. I love it. So we will keep an eye on that story in the next several weeks and months. And right now, let's go ahead to our next segment.
Stop! Hammer time!
Oh, yeah, it's hammer time. It's time to drop the hammer on the douchebag of the week. We've got 2 winners for you this week. So every time we have 2 winners, we allow Wade Garrett to chime in.
The double douche. Who is that guy?
Gentlemen, Wade Garrett.
Holy sh**.
Exactly right.
All right, Wade Garrett serves up winner number 1 this week, the St. Clair Shores, Michigan Police Department. I have this story. This is Megan Woods writing for WDIV Television out of Detroit. This is dated March 31st. In St. Clair Shores, there's a debate swirling around "In God We Trust" decals on the city's police cars. Some residents have questions and conversations rooted in the idea of a separation between church and state and that the people didn't have a say. St. Clair Shores Police Chief Jason Allen said the department started placing the decals on patrol cars in June 2020 under another chief's leadership, as police were in the spotlight and the pandemic was still happening. Daniel Farr, a St. Clair Shores resident, described his search for answers regarding the decals as hard and confusing. He said he first saw the "In God We Trust" sticker on the back of a police vehicle in October 2022. Farr told WDIV, quote, "I lived here my entire life and I've never seen them, and I got interested in how they got there," end of quote. Farr contacted city council members, the mayor, the city manager, and the city attorney. He eventually made a Freedom of Information Act request. In the documents he received, there was an email from former Chief Todd Woodcocks to an officer explaining there would be new free decals of the national motto on marked cars. If anyone objected to them, it would be removed from the vehicle they were driving. That officer replied that if he or any other Christians in the department hear complaints, they would address it and reference a Bible verse, Colossians 3:17. Oh, good Lord. Now I've got to look it up here because I'm just not good with it. Let me read it here. Colossians 3:17. This is from the New International Version of the most violent book ever written. A book of fiction wrote by man 2,000 years ago to control other men and all women. The Bible. Here's what Colossians 3:17 says. "And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him." Really? Farr said the situation had become a First Amendment rights issue, not just church and state. Farr said, quote, "The right to petition my government for redress of grievances, both are at play here, and both of them seem to be ignored. You tell me it's secular, but I have proof that the motive is religious. You tell me it's democratic and it's the national motto, but you did it in the dark and didn't let anybody know about it." End of quote. Allen disagreed, but explained that he cannot speak for Woodcocks. Allen said, quote, "I don't know if it was done under wraps." Oh, really? Bullshit. You know. Lying sack of shit. Decisions are made in this police department and every police department across the country every day that don't involve all public input or input from the governing body. End of quote. Yeah, but it needs to happen. It needs to happen. Heavy oversight of the pigs. Allen also mentioned receiving feedback from 2 people who opposed the stickers and 2 who supported them. Allen said, quote, "Those stickers on a car are not a huge concern to me. There are bigger matters that we need to deal with. And if that's the worst thing that's happening with the police department, then we're doing pretty well." End of quote. Yeah, St. Clair Shores is not a very good place to go. I'll speak from experience. College classmate of mine grew up in St. Clair Shores. She was glad to get the hell out of there. I could possibly say that the police there might have bigger fish to fry, like beating the shit out of people of color. But I won't say that. In early March, Farr spoke in front of the city council asking for the decals to be removed, that there be accountability taken on how the decals came about, an ordinance where elected officials are the only ones making decisions like this, and that the officers who said they and other Christian officers would handle complaints be investigated. Beautiful. I love it. This is the type of bulldog that you need in your corner right here. This Daniel Farr. We need more people like him. We really do. So that's winner number 1, the St. Clair Shores, Michigan Police Department. Winner number 2 is the Republicans in the Tennessee State House. I have breaking news. This is Melissa Brown writing for the Nashville Tennessean newspaper. This is dated today. 10 days after a shooter unloaded 152 rounds at a Nashville school and killed 6 people, Tennessee House Republicans on Thursday voted to eject Representative Justin Jones, Democrat of Nashville, from the General Assembly for breaking House rules and mounting a gun reform protest on the chamber's floor. Expulsion proceedings for Representative Gloria Johnson, Democrat of Knoxville, and Representative Justin Pearson, Democrat of Memphis, were ongoing late Thursday. The historic party line expulsion process has roiled political tensions as the state continues to grapple with the deadliest school shooting in its history. The debate drew widespread attention beyond Tennessee, with the nation's eyes on the volunteer state and thousands of protesters objecting to the expulsion. After gazing up at a packed gallery holding signs in his defense, at the beginning of his 20-minute defense, Jones said, quote, "What is happening here today is a farce of democracy. What is happening here today is a situation in which the jury has already publicly announced the verdict. What we see today is just a spectacle. What we see today is a lynch mob assembled to not lynch me, but our democratic process." End of quote. Jones at one point took a long pause, taking a few sips of water, allowing the chants of "Whose house? Our house" to flow into the chamber from the crowd gathered outside. Jones said, quote, "Your extreme measure is an attempt to subvert the will of voters who democratically elected us as representatives to speak and to passionately fight for them." End of quote. The House voted 72 to 25 to expel Jones, passing the 2/3 threshold needed for expulsion. The expulsion was effective immediately, leading Jones to gather his personal items from his desk. He later took a seat in the House gallery, now as a member of the public watching the legislative hearing below him. Lawmakers considered the fate of the 3 Democrats steps away from hundreds of protesters whose chants permeated the House doors, while more than 200 people stood in silence in the House galleries. Protesters continue to call on Republican lawmakers to pass gun reform and slam the efforts to expel the lawmakers who have been dubbed the Tennessee Three. The trio was accused of breaching decorum and floor rules for speaking at the House podium on March 30th without recognition. Pearson and Jones, both freshman lawmakers who had previously clashed with leadership on other issues this session, walked up to the House podium during a floor session and, using a bullhorn, began leading gun reform chants, echoing the shouts of protesters packed into the Capitol rotunda. The pair, later flanked by Johnson, grew frustrated as House leadership moved on to regular business just days after the mass shooting. House Republicans showed a video montage of the events during the expulsion debate over the ejection of Democrats. The video included footage taken from the House floor by a lawmaker, and Democrats accused Republicans of breaking House rules forbidding members from recording floor sessions. The debate then centered on whether the House was formally in session at the time the lawmaker took the video. Representative Johnny Garrett, Republican of Goodlettsville, who led the GOP arguments against Jones, said, quote, "This is not about one specific instance or one specific rule that may have been broken. The rules here are for order. We owe that to the constituents that we represent across this state." End of quote. No, the rules are there for you to wield your power over everybody else, you lying asshole. The expulsions will strip more than 200,000 Tennesseans of their elected representation and mark just the fourth time since the end of the Civil War in which the House ousted sitting lawmakers. No House member has ever been removed from elected office for simply violating decorum rules. After relieving the lawmakers of committee assignments and shutting off their building access over the weekend, the Republican supermajority moved swiftly Monday to start the expulsion process, among the first legislative actions taken by the General Assembly related to the March 27th mass shooting that killed 6, including 3 9-year-olds. Sarah Newman, the mom to a 5-year-old who attends the Covenant School, watched the expulsion hearings from the House gallery. Pearson at one point went upstairs to give her a hug. She said, quote, "I just want Noah to know I did something for him," end of quote. She said that she wanted to come to the Capitol to honor the Covenant victims, Catherine Kuntz, Mike Hill, Cynthia Peake, Evelyn Dykehouse, Haley Scruggs, and William Kinney, and she thinks of the shooter's family as well. Thousands of Tennesseans have marched en masse on the state capitol 3 times in the 10 days since the tragedy, demanding gun reform measures the ruling party is hesitant, if not outright opposed to, publicly support. Pearson later said he could not sit idly by after lawmakers that day walked through a gauntlet of protesters, many of whom were teenagers, screaming for gun reform. In a Monday letter, Pearson told his colleagues, quote, "If this House decides to expel me for exercising our sacred First Amendment right to help elevate the voices in our community who want to see us act to prevent gun violence, then do as you feel you must. We must always stand up for what we believe to be right and just. We must say no to more gun violence. We must prioritize the voices of thousands of families that are hurting due to this country's gun violence epidemic, especially in communities like District 86. End of quote. On March 30th, the trio were not recognized to speak, an official breach of floor rules, which led House Speaker Cameron Sexton, Republican of Crossville, to recess the House and huddle with leadership for nearly an hour. Democratic leadership led the 3 off the floor, and they continued on with House business. But within days, the lawmakers were stripped of their committee assignments and lost badge access to the legislative office building. Sexton later likened the events to an insurrection, even comparing the peaceful protest that resulted in 0 arrests to the deadly January 6, 2021 riots at the U.S. Capitol. Let me add, traitorous riots. Yeah, because evil, violent, conservative traitors like Sexton don't want people to exercise their First Amendment. They take the Constitution and they wipe their ass with it. They do. They really do. Though he later walked back the comments, he said his remarks were directed at the 3 lawmakers and not protesters. Sexton this week said that he considered the unprecedented floor protest an act against civil authority. Well, duh, that's the purpose of it. Sexton said, quote, what they did was try to hold up the people's business on the House floor instead of doing it the way that they should have done it, which they have the means to do. No, they don't. They don't have a supermajority like you violent assholes do. Let me continue the quote. They actually thought that they would be arrested, and so they decided that them being a victim was more important than focusing on the 6 victims from Monday, and that's appalling. End of quote. No, what's appalling is your behavior there, Sexton. The Thursday vote was widely viewed as a certainty as soon as the Republican caucus voted to file expulsion resolutions. For some, the partisan expulsions are a stark reminder of the supermajority power Republicans have amassed over the state's Democratic urban areas. Protester Ashley Anderson said, quote, I'm devastated. I am. End of quote. Rain was dripping off her hood as she stood in line to enter the Capitol. She added, quote, there's so many emotions that go into how I feel about it. It's really hard to put words to it. It's fascist. It is undemocratic. You're leaving 200,000 constituents of the state without any representation. What is this? This is our freedom at stake. End of quote. Jones's removal would mark the 3rd major circumvention of Nashville voters in the last year, after an aggressive congressional redistricting effort in 2022 split Davidson County and parceled its majority Democratic voter base into Republican-held districts. More recently, infuriated after the Nashville Council blocked a bid to host the Republican Nashville Convention, lawmakers drew up multiple bills to shrink the Metro Council and snatch back control of governing boards such as the local airport and sports authorities. Yeah, because they're sore losers. That's exactly what they are. They are sore losers. In General Assembly history, a partisan expulsion vote like Thursday's is unusual, and an expulsion push over a decorum breach is unprecedented. Emotions ran high on Thursday morning after Jones opposed a school safety bill presented by Republicans, arguing it would further militarize schools while not addressing gun reform issues. Other Democrats said they were concerned the bill treats the symptoms of school shootings, not the problem. Garrett said, quote, that's what is supposed to happen on this House floor when we debate legislation. We hear each other. We don't hear the hate. We don't hear the vitriol. It worked today. It can work for the future. 1 week ago, it didn't work. 1 week ago, we had members take it upon themselves to rush the well and stop the people's business. End of quote. Yeah. No, what happened last week was the First Amendment taking over your fascist assholes, and you didn't like it. Garrett said the protest, by shutting down the work of the House, silenced 7 million Tennesseans. Oh, really? Bullshit! Protesters in the gallery shook their heads as he spoke, but House Minority Leader Karen Camper, Democrat of Memphis, defended her colleagues. She said, quote, Representative Jones represents thousands of people in this state whose voices have been silenced time and time again. We had just had this mass shooting, and he only wanted to elevate the voices of those people. For a simple rule violation, we have elevated this to the highest level of admonishment. That's not democracy. End of quote. The House last expelled a sitting lawmaker in 2016 when the chamber voted 70-2 to remove then-Representative Jeremy Durham, Republican of Franklin, over allegations he had harassed nearly 24 women while in office. In 1980, then-Representative Robert Fisher was expelled on a 92-1 vote after a bribery conviction. 6 lawmakers were ousted during an 1866 special session after they tried to prevent Tennessee from ratifying an amendment to the U.S. Constitution to provide citizenship to former slaves. By the way, I'm sure the Republicans would love to have slavery back as the law in Tennessee. The Senate expelled a member for the first time last year following the conviction of Senator Katrina Robinson, Democrat of Memphis, on federal wire fraud charges. An ethics committee was convened to investigate Robinson's case before it was brought to a vote, which Bruce Oppenheimer, a professor of political science at Vanderbilt University, said is typical procedure. Special committees took up the Durham and Fisher cases. Oppenheimer said, quote, Normally, expulsion from a legislature is an extreme sanction that involves indictment and conviction of a crime or a severe ethical violation. Even when an ethical violation is incurred, lesser penalties of a reprimand or censure would be assessed in most cases. End of quote. Johnson this week decried the expulsion as a double standard and politically motivated. Last year, former House Speaker Glenn Casada, Republican of Franklin, faced federal charges related to an alleged crimes committed while in office and was allowed to finish out his term, while current leadership in 2019 declined to support expulsion charges against former Representative David Byrd, who was accused of sexually assaulting teenagers when he was a basketball coach decades earlier. Johnson, who filed a resolution to expel Byrd at the time, said, quote, "We had a child molester on the floor for years. They helped him get reelected and did nothing to expel him. We've had members pee in each other's chairs. We've had members illegally prescribe drugs to their cousin's mistress, and nothing happened. But talk on the floor without permission and you'll get expelled." End of quote. Compared with others who have been ousted from the legislature, Oppenheimer said the decorum violation, quote, "seems modest, almost to the point of being trivial." End of quote. All three lawmakers have at times publicly clashed with Republican leadership prior to the Covenant School shooting. While Jones is a freshman lawyer, he is no stranger to the Capitol and led public protests against the lawmakers who later became his colleagues. In 2019, he led sit-ins to call for the removal of the bust of Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest from the Capitol and was once arrested for tossing liquid at the former House Speaker. Johnson was first elected to her Knoxville district in 2012 after retiring from teaching. After losing a re-election campaign twice to a Republican opponent, she won the seat back in 2018 and last year won election in a new district after redistricting. She's long been an outspoken Democrat, particularly decrying Tennessee's no-exceptions abortion ban in recent months. Pearson joined the legislature via appointment following the death of Representative Barbara Cooper, Democrat of Memphis, last fall. Like Jones, the 28-year-old rose through local advocacy circles, co-founding a grassroots organization now credited with stopping a proposed crude oil pipeline from cutting through South Memphis backyards. House Republicans publicly scolded Pearson after he wore a traditional West African dashiki on the House floor on his first day in office. And we mentioned that on this show, and for that, they received Douchebag of the Week as well. Despite the high-profile expulsions, the three could technically return to the House within days. The Tennessee Constitution allows a county governing body to appoint an interim representative in the case of a vacancy, an authority General Assembly Republicans could not easily revoke. An expulsion does not disqualify a former representative from running for office, which could mean one of the expelled lawmakers could be appointed interim, run for re-election, and be reseated in the General Assembly within months. God, I hope that happens. Oh, I hope it happens. I hope it sticks in their craw. I hate conservatives. I loathe conservatives. I hate all of them. So, to these two entities, we have this message for you.
Don't be a douchebag.
Yeah, you got that right. Oh boy, how do I say I loathe you in so many ways? It's absolutely unreal. Folks, this is what happens when you vote for evil, violent, conservative traitors. This happens every single time. They protect their own and they go after anybody that's even slightly progressive. Folks, that's going to wrap things up for this week. We'll be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson. Please support independent media, the First Amendment, a woman's right to choose, and the right to protest.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.